Vampire King's baby wouldn't stop crying on the plane until a poor waitress did the unthinkable. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main characters. It was an ordinary day, or so it seemed, as the plane took off into the crisp, clear sky. The hum of the engine was soothing, a familiar sound to the passengers. Among them sat a man who, on the surface, appeared just like anyone else. But in reality, he was far from ordinary. His name was Victor, and though his appearance was impeccably human, there was something undeniably off about him. His pale skin seemed to shimmer under the overhead lights, almost as if it were glowing faintly. His piercing eyes, dark and intense, gave him an aura of mystery and power. He was the Vampire King, a ruler of the night, far older than anyone could imagine. Yet, despite his intimidating presence, Victor had one weakness, one that had never been more evident than right now. His baby, a small bundle swaddled in a soft blanket, was crying loudly in his arms. The wailing echoed through the cabin, causing many passengers to shift uncomfortably in their seats. They shot irritated glances toward Victor, who was trying, with increasing desperation, to calm the infant. His attempts were futile. The baby's cries only grew louder, more frantic. Victor's usual commanding demeanor, one that could silence an entire room with a glance, did nothing to soothe the child. He tried everything, shushing, rocking, even speaking softly in an ancient tongue, but nothing worked. His frustration was growing, though he did his best to hide it. As the cries continued, the passengers around him grew visibly irritated. A few exchanged annoyed looks, others sighed in exasperation. There was no escape from the noise, and the tension in the cabin was thick. That's when Emma walked by. Emma was a waitress on the flight, a young woman with soft brown hair tied neatly in a bun. Her uniform was simple, just a plain white shirt and a black skirt, but she carried herself with a quiet grace. She wasn't looking for attention, but the sound of the baby's cries cut through her routine. Emma hesitated for a moment. She had never been one to intervene in other people's business, especially not in a situation that seemed as delicate as this one. But something in her made her stop. She looked over at Victor, who was now rocking the baby, his face drawn in frustration. Her heart went out to him, and to the baby, who clearly needed comfort. Without thinking too much about it, she walked over to them. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, her voice gentle but firm. Victor looked up, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, there was silence. The cabin seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The Vampire King's cold gaze softened just a fraction. Emma continued, "I know this might sound strange, but may I try?" Victor blinked, taken aback by her sudden offer. He was used to being in control, used to being the one who commanded attention. But something in Emma's demeanor made him pause. He gave a slight nod, reluctant but desperate. Emma smiled, then carefully approached the baby. She gently rocked the child in her arms, her voice soothing as she spoke soft words, a lullaby she'd heard her grandmother sing when she was little. It was simple, comforting, and for reasons Emma didn't fully understand, it worked. Slowly, the baby's cries began to subside. The sound of Emma's voice seemed to reach the infant in a way nothing else had. The child let out a small sigh, and within moments, the cabin was filled with a quiet peace. Emma looked up at Victor, who was staring at her in disbelief. For a moment, their eyes locked. Victor, the Vampire King, a being of untold power, and Emma, a simple waitress who had just performed the impossible. The baby's cries had completely stopped, replaced by a gentle, rhythmic breathing. Victor stared at Emma, his expression still one of disbelief. He couldn't understand it. The child, his own flesh and blood, who had refused to be calmed by every method he knew, was now sleeping peacefully in Emma's arms. How could this simple woman, a mere waitress, accomplish what he could not? For a moment, he simply watched her, his usually unreadable features softening. Emma, oblivious to the scrutiny, gently rocked the baby, humming a tune under her breath. She hadn't expected it to work. She had only acted on instinct, a simple desire to help, but somehow, the child had sensed her calm and comforted itself. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted. The tension that had once filled the space was now replaced by a quiet calm. Passengers, who had once been on edge, now relaxed, their eyes no longer filled with irritation but rather curiosity and relief. The airplane continued its steady course through the sky, the sound of the engines a soft hum in the background. Emma carefully adjusted the baby in her arms, looking up at Victor, who was still silent. I didn't mean to overstep," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and certainly not like this. Victor had said nothing, his gaze intense. "You did more than you know," he finally replied, his voice deep, almost reverent. Emma wasn't sure how to respond. She simply nodded, feeling the weight of his words, though she didn't fully understand their meaning. Her attention shifted to the baby, still asleep in her arms, its tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. For a brief moment, the world outside the plane didn't matter. The only thing that existed was the quiet lullaby she had offered to the child. It was a simple thing, something anyone could have done, but in that moment, it felt like the most important thing in the world. "What is your name?" Victor asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the silence. Emma looked up, startled by the question. She had almost forgotten he was even speaking to her. "Emma," she replied, her voice tentative. "Emma." Victor repeated her name softly, as though trying to memorize it. "You have a gift," he continued. "A gift I had not expected." His words sent a chill through Emma. She wasn't sure whether it was a compliment or something else, but she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of power in the way he said it. She had helped his baby, yes, but this man, who was clearly so much more than ordinary, was now acknowledging her in a way she had never been acknowledged before. "It's just something my grandmother used to sing to me," Emma explained, her tone humble. "It's nothing special." Victor shook his head slightly. "No, it's much more than that." Emma opened her mouth to protest, but before she could speak, the plane began its descent, signaling that they were approaching their destination. She glanced out the window, watching the ground slowly come into view. The city below looked like a collection of tiny dots and squares, a world far removed from the strange encounter she had just experienced. As the plane continued its descent, Emma felt a strange sensation in the pit of her stomach. It was as though something had shifted in the universe, as though this simple act of kindness had somehow set into motion events beyond her control. Victor's gaze never left her, his presence like a shadow that hovered just at the edge of her awareness. She couldn't quite explain it, but she felt as though she were now a part of something much larger than herself. The plane touched down smoothly, and the fastened seatbelt sign dinged, signaling that they had arrived. The passengers began to stir, collecting their belongings, but Emma remained still, the baby still cradled in her arms. Victor was already standing, his tall figure looming over her as he watched her carefully. He seemed as if he were about to say something, but before he could, the doors opened, and the rush of passengers began to make their way out of the plane. Emma stood up, the baby gently nestled against her, and glanced at Victor one last time. There was something in his eyes, an unspoken question, an invitation to something more, something unknown. She didn't know what it was, but she felt it, deep in her bones. With a final, lingering look, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heart pounding in her chest, unsure of what awaited her next. "I thought the encounter was over, but the strange feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away." Emma walked through the airport terminal, still carrying the baby. Her heart was racing, her mind spinning with questions she couldn't answer. Who was that man? And why did his presence linger in her thoughts like a shadow? She had done something simple, something that anyone could have done, but it seemed to have set into motion a series of events that were completely beyond her understanding. She had helped calm a crying child. Yes, but this was no ordinary child. And that man, Victor, was certainly no ordinary person. She shook her head as she walked, trying to shake the feeling of unease. She had worked hard to get here, to this point in her life, and she didn't have time to dwell on things she couldn't control. She was just a waitress. Nothing more. Or at least, that's what she told herself. The terminal was busy, people hurrying to their gates or picking up luggage. It all felt so normal, so mundane, compared to the strange, surreal moment she had just experienced. She glanced down at the baby in her arms. He was still sleeping soundly, his tiny face peaceful, his little fingers curled around her shirt. Emma couldn't help but smile. Despite the strange events, something about holding the baby felt comforting. It reminded her of the simpler days of her childhood, when everything was calm and uncomplicated. As she made her way to the baggage claim, she couldn't shake the image of Victor's face. His eyes had been so intense, so full of something she couldn't place. And the way he had spoken to her, like he was trying to figure her out. She could still hear his voice in her mind. "You have a gift." What did he mean by that? She had no special abilities, no gifts. She was just a regular person, a woman trying to make a living, just like everyone else. But the more she thought about it, the more confused she became. Maybe it was nothing, just a passing moment. Maybe she was reading too much into it. She tried to push the thought out of her mind, but it wouldn't leave. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from her friend, Mia. "How's your day going? You're still at work, right?" Emma smiled at the message. Mia had been her best friend for years. They had met when Emma first started waitressing at the restaurant, and since then, they had been inseparable. Mia was always there to listen when Emma needed to talk, and Emma was the same for her. She quickly typed a response. "Actually, just finished. I'm on my way home now." She sent the message and then tucked her phone back in her pocket. But as she glanced up, something caught her eye. Across the terminal, standing near the exit, she saw a tall figure. She froze. It was Victor. He was standing by the door, looking straight at her. She felt a rush of panic surge through her. What was he doing here? Why was he following her? Her heart skipped a beat. But just as quickly as she had seen him, he disappeared into the crowd. Emma's heart raced, her breath shallow. She blinked, confused. Had she really seen him? Or was it just her imagination? She turned and hurried toward the exit, trying to shake the feeling of dread that was creeping up her spine. She didn't know what was going on, but something told her this was far from over. I fumbled with my purse, feeling the weight of the phone in my pocket. My hands were clammy, and I could feel the tension building in my chest. I had just seen Victor again. It couldn't be a coincidence. He had been standing there, watching me. No, following me. There was no other explanation. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. But what was it? Why was he looking at me like that? What did he want? I had never been the type to think of myself as important or interesting enough to attract attention from someone like him. But everything about this felt different. The way he had stared at me on the plane, the way he had spoken to me, it all felt like it meant something more. And now, here he was again, in the same airport. Was he really following me? Or was I just being paranoid? I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay calm. I had to keep my head straight. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. As I stepped out of the terminal, I glanced around quickly, searching for any sign of him. But there was nothing. The crowd was bustling around me, people rushing to catch taxis or find their gates. I wasn't sure what I expected to see, but there was no sign of Victor. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I was just tired, or maybe the events of the past few hours had me on edge. I walked to the nearest taxi stand and stood in line, trying to focus on something else. But the moment I stepped up to the front of the line, I heard a familiar voice. "Emma." My breath caught in my throat. I froze. There he was, standing just behind me. Victor. His presence was like a force, a quiet intensity that made the air feel heavier. I turned slowly to face him, trying to hide the unease I felt. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. "I was hoping we could talk." I opened my mouth to say something, but no words came out. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. What was he doing here? Why was he following me? I couldn't understand. "You're the one who helped my son," he continued, his gaze softening for a moment. "You did something I couldn't." His words hung in the air, making everything feel more surreal. His son? That wasn't possible. How could he have a child? Was he being serious? But looking into his eyes, I realized he wasn't joking. He was genuine. "I don't know what you want from me," I finally managed to say, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm just a waitress. I don't have any special skills. I just did what felt right." Victor studied me for a long moment, his eyes dark and unreadable. Then he nodded slowly, as if considering my words. "I'm not asking for anything, Emma," he said, his tone soft but insistent. "I simply want to understand. I want to understand why you were able to do something no one else could." I swallowed hard. His words were starting to make me feel like I was part of something much bigger than I could ever imagine. But I didn't know what that something was. I don't know what you mean, I said, shaking my head. I just helped calm your baby. It wasn't anything special. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he was assessing my sincerity. It was something very special, Emma. And you are something very special, whether you realize it or not. I didn't know how to respond. I felt my heartbeat quicken, a strange sense of being both terrified and intrigued at the same time. I had no idea what he was talking about, but there was something about him, something about the way he spoke, that made me want to know more. Please, Victor said, his voice more insistent now. Come with me. Let me show you. I hesitated, torn between wanting to walk away and feeling a pull toward him that I couldn't explain. There was so much I didn't understand. But somehow, I knew my life was about to change forever. I took a deep breath. Then, with a final glance at the taxi line, I nodded. Okay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll go with you. The decision was made. And as I followed him into the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I had known was about to be turned upside down. I followed Victor, my mind racing with uncertainty. The airport seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of us as we walked toward the exit, the clatter of luggage and footsteps filling the air around us. He moved with a quiet confidence, as though the world itself parted for him. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. What had I gotten myself into? He had been so calm, so insistent, and now I was walking beside him, a strange pull in my chest urging me forward. I glanced over at him, wondering what his intentions were. His sharp features remained unreadable, his gaze fixed ahead as if he had no doubt I would follow him. Where are we going? I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite myself. Victor glanced at me briefly, his dark eyes softening just a touch. To a place where you will understand, where you will see the truth. The vague answer only made my anxiety worse, but I didn't dare ask more. Instead, I focused on the path ahead, trying to steady my breathing. The taxi ride had been short, taking us to a part of the city I hadn't seen before. It was quieter, almost secluded, with narrow streets lined with old brick buildings. The air had a strange stillness to it, and the more I looked around, the more out of place I felt. The normal hustle of the city seemed miles away. As we reached a heavy, iron gate, Victor stopped and turned to me. You'll need to trust me, he said, his voice low. There was no questioning the command in his tone. He wasn't asking, he was telling. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should turn back. But something inside me, something I couldn't explain, told me that I needed to see this through. I nodded, trying to mask my fear. I trust you, I said, though the words felt foreign on my tongue. Victor's lips curled into a small smile, though there was no warmth in it. He turned and opened the gate, revealing a large, secluded courtyard. The stone path led up to an imposing mansion, its dark, weathered walls giving off an air of mystery and history. I felt a shiver run down my spine as we approached the door. It wasn't just a house. It was something ancient, something that felt like it had stood the test of centuries. The air around us seemed to hum with an energy I couldn't explain. Victor led me through the door and into a vast hallway, its walls lined with portraits of people I didn't recognize. The place felt almost otherworldly, as though it had been frozen in time. This is my home, he said, his voice distant now, as if speaking to himself. And it is here that you will find the answers you seek. I glanced around, trying to take in my surroundings. The grand chandelier above us cast a faint glow, illuminating the ornate furniture and intricate carvings in the walls. It was beautiful, but it also felt heavy, like the weight of years was pressing down on me. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What answers? Victor stopped and turned to face me. His gaze was intense, piercing, and for the first time, I felt like he was really looking at me, seeing something deep within me. You have a gift, Emma, he said again, his voice steady but forceful. I don't know how you have it or where it comes from, but it's there. And now, it's time for you to understand it. The question is, will you accept it? His words hung in the air, and I felt my heart race. What gift? What was he talking about? I had no powers, no extraordinary abilities. I was just a waitress, nothing special. Yet, the way he spoke, the way he looked at me, made me feel like I was part of something much bigger than I had ever imagined. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but deep down, I knew my life was about to change forever. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely audible. I'm not special. I'm just me. Victor took a step closer to me, his expression unreadable. You are special, Emma. You just need to see it. He reached out and placed a hand gently on my shoulder, his touch surprisingly warm. And when you do, everything will change. I stood there, my body frozen as I processed his words. What was he asking me to believe? Was he telling me I had some kind of power? It was absurd, and yet the way he said it made me wonder. Was this the truth? Or was I just caught up in something far beyond my understanding? I stood there, my body rigid, as Victor's words echoed in my mind. You are special, Emma. The phrase seemed to swirl around me, impossible to ignore, and yet it didn't make any sense. How could I be special? I was just a woman from a small town, working as a waitress to make ends meet. What gift could he possibly be talking about? My thoughts raced as I stared at him, trying to make sense of everything. But his gaze was unyielding, as if he were waiting for something, waiting for me to realize something. You don't believe me, Victor said softly, almost as though he could read my mind. His voice was steady, calm, but there was a certain intensity in the way he spoke. But that's okay. I can help you understand. I've waited a long time for you. The words sent a chill through me. Waited a long time for me. What did that even mean? And what could he possibly want from me? He was a stranger, a man I had only just met. A man who had told me I had a gift I didn't even know existed. And yet, the more I tried to dismiss it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that there was some truth in what he was saying. It was as if something deep within me was stirring, something I had never noticed before. Why me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The question hung in the air, unanswered for a moment. Victor didn't immediately respond. Instead, he looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something far deeper. Because you have something unique about you, Emma, he said finally. You have the ability to connect with the unseen, the things that others cannot sense. And you don't even know it. My heart began to beat faster as his words sank in. Connect with the unseen? What was he talking about? I glanced around the mansion again, its dark, towering walls closing in around me, and I felt a wave of confusion and unease. But Victor's gaze never wavered. You felt it, didn't you? He continued, his voice like a soft command. When you calmed my son on the plane, you weren't just soothing him. You were tapping into something much older. Something ancient. I don't understand, I said, shaking my head. That can't be possible. I'm just me. Victor smiled, but it wasn't a reassuring smile. It was a smile that held centuries of knowledge, of secrets untold. Exactly, he said quietly. You are just you. And that's what makes you so special. I felt a rush of dizziness as his words hit me like a wave. What was he saying? Could it be possible? I had never once thought of myself as anything more than ordinary. But now Victor was telling me that I was somehow connected to something ancient, something beyond my comprehension. And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something inside me, something I had never fully realized. Victor's voice broke through my thoughts. I want to show you something, he said. Something that will help you understand your place in all of this. He reached out his hand, and though every instinct told me to pull back, I found myself stepping forward, slowly. I didn't know what he was offering, but there was something in his presence that made it impossible to say no. As I placed my hand in his, I felt a surge of energy, like a current running through me. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, and for a moment, I felt like I was floating. The world around me seemed to fade, and all I could focus on was the sensation in my chest, the feeling of power, of something ancient and unknown, awakening within me. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it, pulsing, alive, in a way I couldn't explain. This is just the beginning, Emma. Victor's voice came again, but now it seemed distant, as though it was coming from somewhere far away. There's so much more for you to discover. I wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but before I could, everything went silent. The energy around us seemed to fade, and I found myself standing there, staring at Victor as though I had just awoken from a dream. I blinked, unsure of what had just happened. What was that? I whispered, my voice shaking. Victor's gaze softened as he let go of my hand. It was the first step, he said, his voice calm but firm. The first step in understanding who you really are. I stood there, my mind spinning as the energy from Victor's touch faded. My hand still tingled, the sensation lingering as though something inside me had shifted. I looked at him, still trying to make sense of everything. What just happened? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Victor was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes studying me with an intensity that seemed to pierce right through me. You felt it, he said, his voice low, almost reverent. You felt the power within you, the potential. It's always been there, waiting for you to recognize it. I shook my head, confusion swirling within me. I don't understand. I've never felt anything like that before. What do you mean, power? I'm just me. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. That's exactly what makes you special, Emma. You've always been you. But now, you have the chance to awaken something deeper. Something that's always been there, waiting for you to unlock it. I took a step back, unsure of how to process his words. I had always lived a quiet, simple life. There was nothing extraordinary about me. And now, here I was, standing in a mansion with a man who spoke of power and gifts that I couldn't begin to comprehend. Why me? I asked again, my voice trembling. Why do you think I have this power? Victor's expression softened, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of something other than the intensity he usually carried. Because you were chosen, he said, his voice almost a whisper. You were always meant to be a part of something much greater than you could ever imagine. And now, it's time to accept your place in it. His words were like a weight pressing down on me. Chosen. Greater purpose? It all felt like a dream, something I couldn't wrap my head around. But as I looked into his eyes, something deep within me stirred. The feeling wasn't just in my head. It was in my chest, in my very bones. There was something inside me, something that I had always ignored, that was now waking up. I didn't know what it was, but I felt it, undeniable and powerful. I don't know if I'm ready for this, I said, my voice small. I don't even know what this is. Victor reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. You don't have to be ready, Emma, he said. It's not about being ready. It's about embracing what's already within you. The choice is yours, but know this. There is a path before you, and it will lead you to a future you can't yet see. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over me. I had never asked for any of this. I had never wanted to be a part of something greater. I just wanted a normal life, a simple life. But now, everything was different. I was standing at a crossroads, and I could feel the tension building inside me, urging me to make a choice. I looked at Victor, who was waiting for my answer. His gaze was steady, patient, but there was an underlying sense of urgency in his presence. I can't promise you that it will be easy, he said, but I can promise you that it will be worth it. The truth is waiting for you, Emma. All you have to do is reach for it. I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew one thing for certain. My life would never be the same again. I opened my eyes and took a deep breath. What do I need to do? I asked, my voice steady now, despite the turmoil inside me. Victor smiled, a small, knowing smile. Follow me, he said simply, and you'll see everything for yourself. And with that, I followed him, knowing that whatever lay ahead, I was stepping into a world I could never have imagined. A world where everything I thought I knew about myself was about to be turned upside down. I followed Victor through the grand hallway, the ancient portraits on the walls, watching us with cold eyes. The house felt like a maze, each turn revealing more secrets than the last. The air around us was thick with an energy I couldn't explain. It was like stepping into a different world entirely, one that was both familiar and foreign at the same time. I kept my eyes on Victor as we walked, the weight of his words still heavy on my mind. You were chosen, he had said. Chosen for what? What was I supposed to do now that I was here? I wasn't ready for any of this. I didn't know what I was stepping into, but I felt a pull, a strange sense that whatever this was, it was already a part of me. We reached a door at the end of the hall, one that I hadn't noticed before. It was different from the others, heavier, darker, as though it had been untouched for centuries. Victor opened it without a word, stepping aside to allow me in first. The room beyond was dimly lit, but I could make out the shapes of ancient bookshelves lining the walls, filled with dusty tomes and scrolls. In the center of the room, there was a large table covered in maps and strange symbols that I couldn't recognize. I stepped inside cautiously, my curiosity growing with each passing moment. This is where everything begins, Victor said, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Here, You will learn what you need to know. I glanced around the room, my mind racing. What is this place? I asked, trying to make sense of the unfamiliar surroundings. This is where we keep our knowledge, he replied, his tone serious. The knowledge of our kind. The things that have been hidden from the world for centuries. I looked at him, confused. Your kind? What do you mean? Victor's eyes darkened, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of something ancient in his gaze. I am not like other men, he said quietly. And neither are you. My heart skipped a beat. What did he mean by that? I opened my mouth to ask, but he raised a hand to stop me. In time, you will understand, he said. But for now, there is much to learn. The first thing you must know is that you are part of a legacy that goes back thousands of years. He walked over to the table and gestured for me to join him. Sit, he said. This is where your training will begin. Hesitantly, I sat down at the table, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. I had no idea what kind of legacy he was talking about, or why I was suddenly a part of it, but I knew I had to learn more. Victor began pulling books from the shelves, laying them out before me. They were old, the pages yellowed with age, but there was a sense of power in them, an energy that seemed to hum just beneath the surface. These texts contain the history of our people, he explained. The secrets of those who came before us. And now, they are yours to uncover. I stared down at the open page in front of me, but the words seemed strange, almost foreign. They were written in a language I didn't understand, filled with symbols I couldn't make sense of. What is this? I asked, looking up at Victor. This is the language of our ancestors, he replied. It is the key to unlocking the power within you. I looked at him, my mind swirling with questions. I don't understand. How can I learn this? I don't know anything about any of this. Victor's gaze softened slightly. You don't have to understand everything right now, he said. What matters is that you are here. You have already begun your journey. The rest will come in time. As I sat there, staring at the unfamiliar symbols, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. Something was awakening inside me, something that I couldn't control but could no longer deny. The world I had known was fading away, and the world Victor spoke of was beginning to take its place. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew that whatever came next would change everything. My life, as I knew it, was over. And this was just the beginning. I sat there at the table, staring down at the strange symbols before me. I could feel a sense of unease building within me, the weight of the ancient texts pressing down on my shoulders. I didn't know how to read the language, didn't even know where to begin, but somehow, I knew that these symbols held the key to everything, to the power that Victor had spoken of, to the legacy he had mentioned, to the world that was now my reality. My hands trembled slightly as I ran my fingers over the delicate pages, each one a puzzle I couldn't yet solve. The room around me seemed to close in, the walls heavy with the secrets they contained. Victor stood across from me, watching patiently, his eyes not filled with expectation, but with something more, a quiet understanding. Don't worry, he said softly, sensing my hesitation. It will come to you. Just let yourself connect with it. I looked up at him, my voice shaky. But how? How can I learn something like this? I don't even understand what any of this means. Victor smiled slightly, a small curve of his lips. It's not about understanding it all at once. It's about letting it in, allowing yourself to open up to it. The more you resist, the harder it will be. But if you embrace it, you will find your way. His words echoed in my mind, and for a moment, I felt the pull to just let go, to trust him and the process. But fear not at me. I had never been one for change, never been one to step into the unknown willingly. I was just a waitress, living a quiet life. And now, I was being told that I was part of something ancient, something beyond my comprehension. It felt like a dream, but everything about it felt real. What is this all for? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What am I supposed to do with all of this? Victor's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, he looked almost human. It's for you, Emma, he said quietly. This power, this knowledge, it's yours to unlock. The world you thought you knew is only a small part of what is out there. You were born for this, even if you don't fully understand it yet. His words felt like they were being etched into my mind, the weight of them sinking in slowly. I wasn't sure if I was ready for any of this, but something deep inside me knew that I couldn't turn back. There was no going back to the life I had known. I had already taken the first step, and now I had to keep moving forward. As I looked back down at the text before me, I felt a strange warmth spread through my chest. It wasn't the warmth of fear or anxiety. It was something else, something I couldn't quite describe. It felt like the beginning of something important, something that had been waiting for me. I took a deep breath and slowly, carefully, began to trace one of the symbols with my finger. The moment my skin touched the page, something shifted. A spark of energy surged through me, a rush of sensation that left me breathless. The symbols on the page seemed to shift, rearranging themselves in my mind. I could see them now, not just as random marks on paper, but as something much more, something alive. I could feel the language, feel its power coursing through me. For the first time, I understood. It wasn't about knowledge. It was about connection. The connection between me and the world around me. Between me and the legacy that was mine to embrace. My heart raced as I took in the full scope of it. This wasn't just learning, it was awakening. And I was no longer just Emma, the waitress. I was someone different. Someone who had the power to change everything. Victor watched me closely, his eyes gleaming with approval. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked softly. I nodded slowly, unable to find words. I didn't know what had just happened, but I knew that something deep inside me had shifted. The power was real, and I could feel it. It was mine now. I had taken the first step, and whatever came next, I was ready for it.